This simple sea turtle carving project is very easy and beginner friendly, but also quite a lot of fun. All you're gonna need is a thin piece of wood, about 1.5 centimeters thick, 3.5 centimeters wide, and while the length doesn't matter that much, it should be long enough so that you can easily hold on to it. This one is about 8 centimeters in length. The first thing we're going to do is draw a circle on one end of the block of wood. Doesn't have to be perfect, just something like this. And what we're going to do then is carve out this circle without cutting off this extra part. We just define the circle here a little bit while leaving this extra room for holding on to the piece of wood. Here you can use just these simple V-cuts like this. And what we'll want to do is also round out all of these edges a little bit to be more like this, so that the middle part is the highest and it slopes down towards the bottom. For this, these rough cuts work very well. Some push cuts like these can also be very useful. Okay, once we have one edge nice and round like this, the other side works pretty similarly, except now making rough cuts is not gonna work so well. What we need to make are these V-cuts. And notice here that when I'm cutting this way, if you just cut like this, even a V-cut can slip. I'm using my other hand for support over here. So I'm just twisting my wrist like this while making the cuts, which means that the knife won't slip far. Okay, this is good for now. So there's this small dome that's a flat circle from the bottom. And now we can draw a simple turtle on the flat surface on the bottom. Start with the head over here, something like that. Then the fins, 2 curved lines like that. Then another pair of curved lines. And then the shell, which is like kind of like a water droplet shape. And then the fins on the back, just like that. And now we can work on this top-down profile. Just a few sweeping cuts is enough to make a little bit of a distinction between the head and the bigger fins. Just make sure that you keep an eye on the sketch. A few other sweeping cuts that we're making with this kind of a pairing cut version can be used to very easily remove the excess wood on the sides. This is not just about the top-down profile. We can also make these sharp edges created on the back into smooth curves. Now we have a somewhat of a decent basic shape, and a better shape can be achieved with these V-cuts. Well, it's almost like a combination of a stop cut and a V-cut. Now if you're carving this into a similar size as I am, now is the time that we're getting into a point where we gotta start being pretty careful with these thin parts. So all of the cuts from now on need to be made with very little force so that you don't accidentally chip off any of these thin parts. Just small cuts, and if you feel like it gets stuck, readjust and take just small pieces at a time. Now at the same time, when we're focusing on these tiny little corners, making these tiny V-cuts over here, we can make our life a lot easier by also keeping this curvature on the back, both this way and this way, because then we won't have to remove, for example in this situation, we won't have to remove such a thick piece of wood when we're doing this kind of back and forth style between adjusting this curvature and adjusting this corner. So So once you have carved this profile and smoothened the sides a little bit to retain that curvature, the next thing to do is to carve this line between the shell and these two fins and the head. And the easiest way to do that is with these small sweeping cuts. We can also mix in some other cuts that will help us with the thinning of the fins. And now remember to be extra careful, because the thinner the fins get, the easier they will break. I'm using a very soft wood here, but with this kind of a small piece, especially if you try carving it once and you break something, I suggest using a little bit of a harder wood, because with a small piece like this, the thin parts are going to be much more durable with a harder wood, and the carving process is not going to be that strenuous due to the small size of the figure. The closer you get to the final shape, the smaller all of these cuts will become. And then it's just more about refining the shape instead of taking big chunks out of it. Now before we cut off this part and make the final adjustments on the fins and the head, it's a good time to check the side profile and see if you still need to make it thinner. I'm taking off just a little bit of that extra wood, because in my opinion this is still maybe slightly too thick. I think is a nice little detail is carving this kind of a texture onto the shell of the turtle by making slightly bigger cuts than before. So in the middle right here, I'm carving 5 different sections like this and trying to make the middle one the biggest. Then on the sides, I'm making 4 similar sections to get that turtle shell texture. Just remember that up until the middle part here, the cuts need to be made that way, and then from here on to the back side, they need to be made this way. And that is due to this curvature that makes it so that if you cut from here, you cut against the grain and you're gonna chip a big chunk. Then by bringing these sections on the sides a little bit closer to the middle, it's quite easy to get this hexagon shape. I think that's pretty good. Then it's time to cut this extra piece off. Just make sure that you leave enough space for the back fins. So here from the drawing we can still see where we should cut. Now we can finish this part. So what the shape is going to be like is basically the letter M, like that. And this can be easily achieved with V-cuts. No need to restrict the V-cuts only to this profile. We can make them here also to make our work a lot easier. And again, we can use sweeping cuts, just small, very tightly curving sweeping cuts to define this edge between the shell and the fins. Now all that's left to do is some final adjustments and smoothing of these places that still remain a bit rough.